People all over the world have been struck by its stunning imprint of the face of Jesus Christ. Not everyone's convinced that the shroud is a genuine holy relic.
What if one of the most debated relics in human history wasn't just an image, but a record?
Ever since the shroud first really appears in history, there's been controversy about it, and there have been questions about its authenticity.
When AI technology was turned on the Shroud of Turin, it didn't find paint, pigment, or medieval trickery. It found depth, structure, and precision no known technology should have been able to produce. And that discovery has forced the world to ask a terrifying question. What exactly happened on this cloth? A mystery that refuses to die. At first glance, it barely looks like anything at all. A faint shadow, a ghost-like outline, an image so subtle that if you stand too close, you miss it entirely. But step back, adjust the light, and suddenly a human form emerges, front and back, imprinted onto a linen cloth, more than 14 feet long. A man who appears beaten, scourged, and crucified. A man whose wounds align uncannily with the gospel accounts of Jesus Christ. For believers, the shroud has long been seen as sacred. For skeptics, it has been treated as a medieval curiosity or an elaborate hoax. For scientists, it has become one of the most puzzling physical objects ever studied. And now, in the 21st century, a new participant has entered the debate: artificial intelligence. Not AI designed to promote belief, not AI programmed to debunk faith, but AI was built for forensic reconstruction, medical imaging, and historical analysis. Systems capable of seeing patterns, depth, and data the human eye cannot perceive. What these systems uncovered stunned researchers across multiple disciplines. This was not just an image enhancement. This was not just a clearer picture. The AI revealed depth. It revealed three-dimensional structure. It revealed medical precision encoded into the fibers themselves. And with that discovery, the Shroud of Turin was no longer just an old cloth with a mysterious image. It became something else entirely, a data-rich object that behaves more like a medical scan than a work of art. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe if you want more deep, evidence-based explorations into biblical history, ancient mysteries, and the intersection of faith and science. What we're about to explore doesn't settle the debate around the Shroud of Turin. It intensifies it. The shroud that defied every era. The Shroud of Turin has never fit neatly into any historical category. Measuring roughly 14 feet long and just over 3 feet wide, the linen cloth bears the faint front and back imprint of a naked man, laid out as if for burial. The figure appears to have suffered extreme physical trauma, including puncture wounds in the wrists and feet, a wound in the side, and extensive scourging across the back, and swelling around the face and shoulders. What immediately sets the shroud apart is how the image exists, or rather, how it doesn't. There are no brush strokes, no pigment layers, no visible paint, no evidence of dye soaking into the fabric. Under microscopes, the fibers remain largely unchanged beneath the surface. The coloration exists only on the outermost fibrils of the linen threads, penetrating less than a fraction of a fiber's thickness. For centuries, people looked at the shroud and struggled to even see the image clearly. It appears almost like a photographic negative: light areas where shadows should be, dark areas where highlights should exist. But this strange characteristic wasn't understood until the late 19th century, when photography revealed something astonishing. When the first photographic negative of the shroud was developed in 1898, the image suddenly snapped into clarity. The negative looked like a positive photograph. Facial features became sharply defined. The body proportions appeared realistic. The wounds aligned in ways that medieval religious art never depicted. What had looked vague to the naked eye suddenly appeared precise, anatomical, and deeply human. This alone raised unsettling questions. Photography didn't exist in the Middle Ages. Negative imaging wasn't understood. And yet the shroud behaved as though it had anticipated future technology. Over time, scientists from multiple fields began studying it: chemists, physicists, pathologists, textile experts, and historians. Each new test seemed to answer one question while raising three more. Pollen grains found on the cloth matched plants native to the Middle East, not medieval Europe. Blood markers were detected that behaved like real human blood. not paint or dye. The blood appeared to have been deposited before the image itself formed, something almost impossible to reproduce artistically. And while some carbon dating tests suggested a medieval origin, others challenged those results, pointing to contamination, repairs, or sampling limitations. The deeper researchers went, the stranger the shroud became. How could an ancient or medieval creator embed an image with photographic properties centuries before photography existed? How could they create an imprint that behaves like a three-dimensional relief when analyzed mathematically? How could they produce medical accuracy that aligns with modern forensic understanding of crucifixion, knowledge that simply did not exist in earlier eras? The shroud seemed to sit outside of time, refusing to belong fully to antiquity, the Middle Ages, or the modern world. And that refusal is precisely what made it irresistible to science. When artificial intelligence entered the debate. Artificial intelligence was not introduced to the Shroud of Turin with the intention of proving it divine or exposing it as a fraud. In fact, the initial goal was far more restrained. Researchers wanted to apply modern image analysis tools, similar to those used in forensic investigations, medical scans, and archaeological reconstructions to see whether previously hidden information could be extracted from high-resolution digital scans of the cloth. The AI systems used were trained to detect depth, contour, and spatial relationships within complex visual data. These are the same types of systems used to reconstruct faces from skulls, analyze CT scans, and build three-dimensional models from degraded historical artifacts. When researchers fed the shroud's data into these systems, they expected some improvement in clarity. What they did not expect was a breakthrough. Instead of flattening or distorting the image, the AI detected consistent depth information encoded across the entire figure. When processed, the image produced a coherent three-dimensional model of a human body. The face emerged with realistic proportions. The nose projected correctly. The eyes sat in natural sockets. The cheeks and jawline followed anatomical norms. Even subtle variations in muscle tension and body contour appeared spatially accurate. This was not what happens with paintings or photographs. If you attempt to extract depth from a normal image, the result collapses into noise. A painting contains no real depth data. It is an illusion created by shading and perspective. But the shroud behaved differently. The brightness and darkness of the image correlated directly with the distance between the cloth and the body that once lay beneath it. In simple terms, the shroud appears to record how far each part of the body was from the cloth at the moment the image formed. That revelation alone stopped researchers cold. No known medieval technique could encode three-dimensional spatial data into a fabric without pigments, tools, or measuring instruments. No known artistic process can create an image that doubles as a topographical map of a human body. And yet, the AI reconstruction did exactly that, without inventing details, without hallucinating features, simply by decoding what was already present. The shroud was not just an image, it was information. And once that realization took hold, the implications became impossible to ignore. When AI read the body, like a medical file. Once the artificial intelligence finished reconstructing the three-dimensional form hidden within the shroud, the investigation crossed a line it had never crossed before. Until then, the shroud had lived mostly in the worlds of theology, history, and image analysis. But the moment a human body emerged, complete with proportions, contours, and anatomical consistency, the conversation shifted. This was no longer just about images. It was about injuries, and injuries belong to medicine. That realization brought a new group into the room: forensic pathologists, trauma specialists, physicians trained to read damage written into muscle, bone, and skin. These were not theologians or believers. Many were skeptics by nature, trained to distrust assumptions and focus only on physical evidence. They were shown the AI-generated reconstruction without commentary, without interpretation, and without being told what they were supposed to see. What followed was not excitement, it was silence. As the specialists examined the model, patterns began to emerge, patterns that were disturbingly coherent. The wrists immediately drew attention. For centuries, artists had depicted crucifixion nails driven through the palms, but modern anatomy shows that the palms cannot support the weight of a human body. The AI reconstruction revealed trauma not in the palms, but through the wrist area, precisely where nails would have to pass between the carpal bones to hold a body upright. This detail alone stunned reviewers. It was not a guess. It was mechanically correct. Then there were the shoulders. The AI showed evidence of repeated strain, subtle deformation, consistent with heavy downward pressure. The muscles and joints suggested that the arms had been pulled upward and outward for extended periods, supporting significant weight. This aligned perfectly with what would happen if a man were forced to carry a heavy wooden beam and then suspended by his arms for hours. The strain patterns weren't exaggerated or dramatic. They were clinical, real. As the model rotated, attention shifted to the back. What appeared faint and indistinct on the cloth became unmistakable under AI enhancement. Dozens of small wounds appeared across the back, shoulders, and legs, each with a distinctive shape. Medical experts recognized them almost instantly. These were not random marks. They matched the damage caused by a Roman flagrum, a whip fitted with bone or metal tips designed to tear flesh. The spacing, depth, and irregular angles suggested repeated strikes, delivered with force, from multiple positions. This wasn't artistic symbolism, it was documentation. The face revealed even more. Swelling around the cheeks and eyes suggested blunt trauma. The nose appeared damaged, consistent with being struck hard. Bruising patterns indicated blows from different directions, not a single impact. Even the beard area showed signs of stress, as if hair had been pulled violently. These were details no one had clearly seen before, not because they weren't there, but because they were too subtle for the naked eye. Perhaps most haunting was what the legs revealed. The posture encoded in the image suggested repeated movement, slumping, and pushing upward again. Medical experts recognized this immediately as the body's response to slow suffocation. Crucifixion victims do not die quickly. They die as exhaustion prevents them from lifting themselves to breathe. The AI model captured that struggle, frozen in linen. What disturbed the experts most wasn't that the injuries matched biblical descriptions. It was that they matched modern forensic understanding of crucifixion, knowledge that simply did not exist in the medieval world. Artists of that time worked from tradition, theology, and imagination. They did not understand suspension trauma, respiratory failure, or muscle fatigue under prolonged stress. Yet the shroud encodes all of it. The AI had not interpreted the injuries, it had simply revealed them. At that point, the investigation reached a chilling realization. If this image were a forgery, it would require medical knowledge centuries ahead of its time, embedded invisibly into a cloth, using no known method. And that raised a question no one in the room could answer. The image that shouldn't exist. Even after the medical findings, one mystery still loomed larger than all the rest. Not who the man was, not how he died, but how his image ended up on the cloth at all. To answer that, researchers turned away from the body and back to the fabric itself. The linen fibers of the shroud had been studied before, but never with the combined power of modern microscopy and AI-assisted pattern analysis. When those tools were applied together, the results were baffling. The image was not embedded in the cloth. It was not soaked into it. It barely touched it. Under extreme magnification, scientists observed that only the outermost layer of individual fibers had changed color. Not the entire thread, not even the entire fiber, just the surface fibrils, thinner than a human hair by orders of magnitude. The discoloration stopped abruptly, as if something had interacted with the cloth for a fraction of a moment and then vanished. This behavior ruled out every known artistic technique. Paint penetrates fibers, dyes soak in, heat scorches deeper layers. Even chemical stains spread, but the shroud's image refused to behave like any of them. There were no brush strokes, no pigment particles, no binding agents, no residue of any substance that could explain intentional application. AI-assisted analysis reinforced this conclusion. The algorithms searched for repeating patterns consistent with human craftsmanship and found none. Instead, they detected uniformity across the image that suggested a single simultaneous event, something that affected the cloth all at once rather than piece by piece. The image also behaved like a photographic negative, meaning light and dark values were reversed. But photography wouldn't be invented for another 600 years. More puzzling still, the image encoded distance information. Areas closer to the cloth appeared darker, while areas farther away appeared lighter, allowing AI to reconstruct depth accurately. Paint cannot do that. Photography wasn't available, and no medieval technology could encode spatial data invisibly. This led some researchers to cautiously explore a possibility they were reluctant to name. The image formation appeared consistent with a rapid energy interaction, something capable of altering molecular structures at the surface level without burning, tearing, or penetrating the fabric. Some compared it to ultraviolet radiation. Others avoided labels altogether, saying only that the mechanism remains unknown. To be clear, no one proved a supernatural event occurred. But no one could demonstrate a natural or artificial process that fit all the evidence either. The image seemed to exist in a category of its own. Attempts to recreate the shroud have failed for decades. Some experiments can mimic the appearance, but not the depth. Others can affect surface fibers, but not produce a coherent image. None can do both, while also encoding anatomical realism and three-dimensional data. The AI findings didn't solve this problem. They made it impossible to ignore. The shroud no longer looked like an object waiting to be debunked. It looked like an object waiting to be understood, one that didn't fit neatly into history, science, or art. And with every layer peeled back, the same unsettling truth emerged. This image should not exist, not with the tools of the ancient world, not with the knowledge of the medieval era, not even easily with modern technology. And yet, there it was, silent, fragile, and stubbornly unexplained. The face AI revealed, and why it changed everything. When the artificial intelligence finished assembling the three-dimensional data encoded within the shroud, the final step was inevitable. The system began reconstructing the face. This was the moment many researchers approached with caution, even discomfort. Faces carry emotional weight. They invite interpretation, and they have the power to cross the line from analysis into meaning. But what emerged from the data was not sensational. It was not dramatic. It was quiet. The AI did not exaggerate features or smooth imperfections. It did not idealize the face or impose symmetry where none existed. Instead, it simply translated depth, contours, and spatial information already present in the cloth into a visible form. What appeared on the screen was a Middle Eastern man, likely in his early 30s, with a broad nose, deep-set eyes, a full beard, and long hair parted at the center. His facial structure was strong but not imposing. His features were distinct but not stylized. What immediately struck observers was the expression. Despite the extensive trauma visible across the body, the face was not frozen in agony. There was swelling, bruising, and damage consistent with violent blows, yet the overall expression was calm. The eyes were closed, the mouth relaxed. There was no contortion of pain, no grimace. Instead, there was stillness. For many scientists in the room, that detail was unexpectedly unsettling. The AI had not created an expression. It revealed one, and that expression suggested that the moment captured by the shroud was not during suffering, but after it. The injuries spoke of brutality. The face spoke of rest. Further analysis revealed remarkable consistency. The proportions of the face aligned perfectly with the dimensions of the skull implied by the shroud's image. The symmetry was natural, not artistic. Artists often exaggerate balance or idealize faces unconsciously. This face resisted that impulse. It was human in a way that felt unfiltered. When compared to centuries of artistic depictions of Jesus, something surprising emerged. Many traditional icons across cultures and eras shared features with the AI reconstruction. The long hair, the beard, the proportions of the nose and eyes. Scholars began to ask an uncomfortable question. Were artists across centuries copying earlier artwork, or were they unknowingly echoing an image that had been preserved all along? The AI reconstruction did not confirm religious belief, but it disrupted the assumption that all depictions were purely imaginative. Perhaps most importantly, the AI did not add detail. It did not enhance creatively. It only revealed what was already present, encoded at a level too subtle for the human eye. This distinction mattered. The face was not generated. It was decoded. As images of the reconstruction spread among research circles, reactions diverged sharply. Some viewed it as a technological triumph. Others felt an emotional weight they hadn't expected. A few admitted that, regardless of belief, Seeing the face changed how they perceived the shroud. It stopped being an abstract mystery and became something deeply personal. For the first time, technology had not distanced people from the relic. It had brought them closer, and that closeness made the next phase of the debate far more intense. Why the debate didn't end, but became even more dangerous. In science, discoveries often narrow uncertainty. They eliminate possibilities. They bring closure. What happened with the Shroud of Turin was the opposite. Artificial intelligence did not settle the debate. It fractured it. Skeptics argued that no matter how compelling the data appeared, technology cannot prove identity. A three-dimensional image, they insisted, does not equal authentication. Correlation is not causation. Medical accuracy does not automatically imply historical truth. These arguments were not unreasonable. Science, after all, demands caution, but supporters countered with a challenge of their own. If the shroud is not authentic, then what exactly is it? To maintain a forgery hypothesis, critics now had to account for a growing list of anomalies. A negative image created centuries before photography. Three-dimensional depth encoded without distortion. Anatomically precise injuries consistent with Roman execution methods. Fiber-level discoloration affecting only the outermost surface. No pigments, no dyes, no tools, no known process. Each explanation addressed one element, but failed to explain them all together. Radiation theories entered the conversation reluctantly. No serious researcher wanted to invoke unknown forces. But some admitted that the image formation resembled the effects of intense, ultra-short energy bursts, seen only in laboratory conditions. Others rejected this outright, arguing that invoking unknown mechanisms risks turning science into speculation. Historians raised different concerns. Carbon dating tests from the late 20th century suggested a medieval origin, but those samples were taken from a portion of the cloth that may have been repaired after a fire. Later studies questioned whether the tested material was representative of the original fabric. The debate over contamination, repairs, and sampling bias resurfaced with new urgency. What made this moment different was that AI had shifted the burden of explanation. Previously, skeptics could dismiss the shroud as crude, unclear, or easily fabricated. Now, the image appeared precise, coherent, and stubbornly resistant to dismissal. Believers, too, were divided. Some embraced the findings as confirmation. Others urged restraint, warning against turning faith into a technological argument. They pointed out that belief does not require proof, and that science has limits. Yet even among those cautious voices, there was acknowledgement that something extraordinary had occurred. AI had not proven divinity, but it had dismantled complacency. The shroud could no longer be casually explained away. Conferences began dedicating entire sessions to the new findings. Journals published cautious analyses. Critics sharpened their objections. Supporters refined their models. And the public, watching from the outside, sensed something rare unfolding. A mystery that modern science expected to close had instead grown deeper. The Shroud of Turin had survived centuries of scrutiny, skepticism, and reverence. Now it had survived artificial intelligence. And that raised a final, uncomfortable realization. If even our most advanced tools cannot fully explain it, then the shroud occupies a space science does not yet control. Not because it defies reason, but because it exposes the limits of what we currently understand. And that is often where the most important questions begin. When science reaches its limit and the mystery refuses to close. By the time artificial intelligence had finished its analysis, one uncomfortable truth had become impossible to ignore. Modern science had reached the edge of its explanatory power. For decades, the expectation surrounding the Shroud of Turin was simple. With enough data, enough technology, enough testing, the mystery would eventually collapse into a neat conclusion. Either it would be proven a medieval forgery, or it would be explained as a misunderstood natural phenomenon. The assumption was that time and progress would erode the unknown. AI did the opposite. Instead of flattening the mystery, it added depth, literally and figuratively. It revealed that the image on the shroud behaves less like artwork and more like data. It behaves like information encoded at a microscopic level, structured in a way that responds to modern analytical tools with coherence rather than distortion. That alone unsettled many researchers, because coherence is not accidental. In most historical artifacts, enhanced analysis exposes flaws. Pigments bleed, brush strokes appear, layers contradict one another. With the Shroud, enhancement did not reveal mistakes. It revealed structure, and structure implies process. Yet no known process fits. The medieval world lacked the physics, chemistry, and optics required to produce such an image. Even today, laboratories attempting to replicate the Shroud's properties fail to reproduce all of its characteristics simultaneously. Some can mimic superficial discoloration, others can create negative-like images. None can combine three-dimensional depth, anatomical accuracy, fiber-level surface alteration, and negative imaging into a single coherent result. This is where science becomes deeply uncomfortable, because science is not threatened by mystery, it is threatened by mystery that refuses to shrink. Some researchers now argue that the Shroud should no longer be approached as a problem to be solved, but as a phenomenon to be studied. This subtle shift matters. Problems imply solutions. Phenomena imply ongoing observation without guaranteed closure. The Shroud behaves like a phenomenon. Historians find themselves re-examining early records, noting how descriptions of burial cloths, folded linens, and mysterious wrappings appear repeatedly in ancient texts. Scientists find themselves revisiting assumptions about image formation, energy transfer, and biological imprinting. Even skeptics are forced to refine their objections because dismissiveness no longer holds. For believers, the Shroud has never required validation. Faith does not depend on algorithms. But even among theologians, there is recognition that something unprecedented has occurred. Technology has not replaced belief. It has intersected with it in a way that invites reflection rather than certainty. And perhaps that is the most unsettling outcome of all. AI, a tool designed to analyze patterns and reduce uncertainty, has encountered something that resists reduction. The Shroud does not collapse into data points. It responds to them, revealing complexity without surrendering meaning, which raises a final, unavoidable question. What if the Shroud was never meant to be explained away? What if it exists not as proof, not as propaganda, not as deception, but as an enduring intersection between history, suffering, faith, and human limitation? In that sense, the Shroud functions less like evidence and more like a mirror. Scientists see the boundaries of their tools. Historians see the fragility of their timelines. Believers see a reflection of hope, sacrifice, and transcendence. Skeptics see a challenge that refuses easy dismissal. Artificial intelligence has not solved the Shroud of Turin. It has placed it firmly in the present, and in doing so, it has ensured that the debate will not fade with time. It will intensify, it will evolve, and it will continue to draw new generations into the same question humanity has asked for centuries. What are we truly looking at? A relic, a record, a message, or a mystery deliberately preserved beyond our reach? The Shroud in the age of artificial intelligence. What comes next? As the dust settles from the AI analysis, one thing becomes clear. The Shroud of Turin has entered a new era, not because it has been explained, but because it has resisted explanation at the highest level humanity can currently offer. For centuries, the Shroud survived fires, wars, skepticism, and neglect. It endured primitive testing, ideological battles, and academic ridicule. Each generation believed it would be the one to finally close the case, and yet, here it stands, now examined by machines capable of seeing beyond human perception, still refusing to give a final answer. Artificial intelligence did not expose a trick. It did not uncover hidden brushstrokes or reveal a forgotten medieval technique. Instead, it treated the Shroud as what it appears to be, a dataset unlike any other in human history. And when processed, that dataset behaved in ways no known artwork ever has. The image responded to AI the way a body responds to medical imaging. It revealed spatial coherence. It preserved proportional depth. It encoded trauma consistently across the cloth. And it did all of this without ink, without pigment, without penetration beyond the surface of the fibers. This is where the story becomes less about belief and disbelief and more about humility. Because regardless of where one stands, the Shroud now forces an uncomfortable admission. We do not fully understand how it came to be. Not technologically, not historically, not scientifically. That realization matters. In an age where humanity often assumes mastery over nature, data, and truth, the Shroud stands as a quiet contradiction. It reminds us that not everything bends to explanation, that not every mystery is waiting to be solved. Some exist to endure. For scientists, the Shroud is no longer just an artifact. It is a boundary marker, a point where data ends and interpretation begins. A reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, still operates within limits defined by human understanding. And perhaps that is the Shroud's greatest power. It does not demand belief. It does not force disbelief. It invites reflection. Artificial intelligence has shown us more of the image than ever before. It has given shape to what was once only shadow. But in doing so, it has also revealed how much remains hidden, not because it is obscured, but because it may exist beyond the reach of explanation itself. The Shroud of Turin has survived empires, revolutions, and renaissances. Now it has survived artificial intelligence, and it remains what it has always been, a quiet, unyielding presence at the intersection of history, science, and faith. A question written in cloth, a mystery that refuses to fade, and a reminder that even in the age of machines that can see what we cannot, some truths or some silences still belong to something greater than us. If this discovery fascinated you, stay with us. Subscribe for more long-form explorations into history, faith, and the discoveries that challenge everything we think we know. Because the next breakthrough may not answer the question,